Okay, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. My name is Mark Kligman, and I am a professor in the departments of musicology and ethnomusicology. And this program today is brought to you on behalf of the Alan D. Levy Center for Jewish Studies, as well as the Lowell Milken Center for Music of American Jewish Experience, which I direct, as well as the Joy and Jerry Monkish Family Fund. There are a lot of activities with both of these centers. We hope you look at the websites for the Jewish Studies Center. There's some really interesting flyers in the back. Anyone who's interested in our Jewish music activities, we're doing an opera called Schoenberg in Hollywood in May, and you can check out our website to find more information. Really gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest today. Jessica Roda is trained between Europe and North America. I don't think she means in the Atlantic, but I think she means between both of those continents. Her research interests include music, religion, cultural heritage, gender, health, and media. She has published over 15 scholarly articles and 3 books, and I might add she publishes in multiple languages as well, and a special issue of an academic journal, and the topics again, are all in French and English. She currently is an assistant professor at Georgetown University in their Center for Jewish Civilization, and proud to say that she just got tenure, so we congratulate her. Mazel tov on tenure. Jessica Roda's public-facing work has appeared in the BBC, and I'm not French, so I don't know how to pronounce this, La Presse?
La Presse.
La Presse. TV Quebec, the Huffington Post, Academe, Radio Canada, Canadian Jewish News, French Culture, The Moment Glamour, The Conversation US, Times of Israel, and numerous networks in Europe and America. And this includes Brazil, Canada, and Colombia, so you can see how well-traveled and international she is. Beyond her academic life, she's also a trained pianist, flautist, and modern jazz dancer as a part of the City of the Paris Conservatory, and she grew up in French Guiana, a childhood that shaped her as a person, educator, and scholar. On a personal note, Jessica and I have known each other for a few years, and most recently we both had a fellowship together at the University of Pennsylvania at the Katz Center for Judaic Studies, and we were office mates. We had office right next to each other and had many lovely conversations. Her research is just so fascinating and wonderful, and she's speaking about a new book that was just published last year, right? And a book on Haredi women. We'll hear all about it. So without further ado, welcome Jessica Roda.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you. So I would like to thank Mark Kligman for the invitation to be here at the University of California, Los Angeles, to present my book that is entitled For Women and Girls Only, Reshaping Jewish Orthodoxy with the Arts in the Digital Age. I also would like to thank all the organizers and for making this talk possible. Is the sound good? Yes. So I'm going to talk today. In this talk, I will give you a glimpse into the artistic lives of Haredi women in North America. So when I talk about Haredi women, it's essentially Hasidic and Litvish communities in New York and Montreal, with whom I worked for several years, and how through their creative work they are transforming Orthodox Jewish life using the arts and digital technology. But more than that, their experiences invite us to rethink broader questions of publicity and privacy in the digital age, as well as issues of copyrights, intellectual property, and celebrity culture. What is at stake here is the paradox of being invested in the arts, of being a woman, artist, and also an Orthodox religious woman. How does this negotiation take place? Indeed, the lives of women in religious circles are dictated by the concept of tzniut, modesty, the law of modesty that involve privacy and discretion. Yet, once women transform their arts into a commodity, issues of the public nature of their productions arose. To transform their arts into these commodities, to transform their arts into a market and an industry, they have renegotiated and redefined religious norms, modifying the strict demarcation between Orthodox and non-Orthodox public media. My book is a contribution to the literature in religious studies, ethnomusicology, and gender studies. While most research on Haredi women in the arts and in music has focused on the private, educational, and social dimensions of their artistic lives, my book reveals and impacts a new reality, one shaped by celebrity culture, copyrights, and individual promotion. It explores the processes through which Haredi women have been able to bring about various transformations. So I will present you different musical material today where women place the responsibility on men to decide or not to listen to their voices in accordance with their understanding of modesty, sometimes approved by specific religious authority or simply by choice. There's a lot of don't ask, don't tell among the women I collaborated with. So let me begin with an ethnographic vignette to give you a sense of the universe I immersed myself for the last 6 years between Montreal and New York City. It feels like only yesterday when I met Goldie for the first time in Montreal. I was Goldie's piano teacher from 2016 to 2017, and since then, a shared love of music has sustained our friendship. I witnessed Goldie growing up as she developed from a shy, talented, and artistic child to a confident married woman full of grace and elegance, working full-time as an administrative assistant, singing, acting, and playing the piano informally, as well as recording her music in a home studio owned by a Montreal Hasidic woman from the Platzer community, Rochelle. Rochelle advertises her music business in the local Hasidic press, the Montreal one, without depicting any women faces, as is the norm in her community media. Like all the girls and women in their Hasidic communities, like Bell, Sadmar, Bobov, Vishnis, most of the communities I work with. Alongside Goldie's artistic production, I uncover another art scene exclusive to women and girls within Haredi circle, where women label themselves as frum female artists, FFA. This art scene, instead of being an informal market hiding women's faces and voices, took the stage as a formal market that exists online on social media and is advertised as being, and I quote, for women and girls only, or Kol Isha. Contrary to Goldie's closely controlled personal dissemination of her music to close family and friends, the women and girls invested in this new art scene available online considered the warning for women and girls only to be a sufficient marker to underline the privacy of the content, an indication that boys and men should not access it. In taking this approach, they suggest new avenues for negotiating between the public aspect of the arts and modesty. I discovered this online art scene during COVID-19 pandemic. Frum female artists are challenging the traditional shape of the music industry in Orthodox circles by advocating for a distinct branch within it. While they are working with women and men as well from inside and outside their communities, they perform for various ultra-Orthodox female audiences, from conservative to liberal ones, online in summer camps, schools, as well as private events, and they also collaborate with women who have decided to break away from Orthodoxy, as did some of the frum female filmmakers I collaborated with. While I call the frum female art worlds decline itself to multiple forms of modesty and publicity. So let me introduce you to 3 different examples about this frum female art world, and more specifically how it encapsulates the different way women think about exposure, visibility, and publicity. So the first one is a video. It's a composition by Hayala Newhouse and is interpreted by men, and I will explain you a little bit after that what happened with it. The second one is the singer Bracha Jaffe, who grew up in, Litvish Yeshivish community, Flatbush. And it's also a composition by Hayala Newhouse. It's another example of women's visibility. And the last one is Ricky Rose, who grew up in associated Satmar Hasidic community in Williamsburg, but who is not part of the community anymore. So let's get a sense of this music. And I'm going to play a little bit with the music video because it's pretty long, but I want you to show you a specific part.
morning, and every street corner is humming a non-stop race, the rushing pace of a town going and coming. And there's a steady pulse, not always heard, not always seen, but felt beneath the surface, one that's quiet and serene. Ve'atalis, 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 al kulana. Behind each blot, each letter, and each word, it's you, the crown of our town. Ve'atalis, al kulana. It's your merit that is holding up the world, holding up the world.
Okay, I'm gonna get out because I want to show you another part of the video. So this first video, there was a kind of, when it came out in 2022, a backlash, a discussion, especially on social media, about the fact that this is a music video celebrating women, but there's not a single moment where you see women's faces. And some women who were pretty active in the community, in different communities, were discussing, and some of them were outraged. Others responded that actually that was their desire to not be fully seen, and that was a way to be visible, audible, but in a different way. And I want to show you now another example. So this is Bracha Jaffe.
Are you looking at me, or do you really see me? Amudim sees you for who you are. Regardless of the external shell, they will support you in any way possible. This song is for Amudim's Unite to Heal. Remember, don't just look, see.
So in this video, composed also by Montreal and New York, interpreted by Bracha Jaffe, it's different faces and different way of being modest that are embraced in this music video, and through a different age, different stage, and even towards the end, this is my interpretation, but we can even imagine there is a certain sort of queerness that is embraced here, and knowing, I didn't ask directly Bracha when the video came out, but knowing her, that's potentiality as well. And if you read the comments, it's a lot about this idea. And the last example is Ricky Rose. As I said, she grew up Hasidic, Satmar affiliated community, and she's known as one of the most important singer, Yiddish singer, who grew up in the Hasidic community, and she's becoming increasingly famous. And then I will make a connection between the three music video. Whoops. So here she's interpreting a composition in Yiddish, and it's in front a conference, an audience of people who came to this conference about OTD, people living in the community, but in the audience you also had people from the community who were present. And the interesting part with Ricky is that she knows Chayala Newhouse, and she also knows Bracha Jaffe, and there's a connection between those three artists on social media, or some of them will attend some concert as well, and there's a circulation of knowledge here.
Why are you getting me crazy? Ik had ze die met de rijden zingen. Ik had ze die met de rijden. Ik had ze die met de rijden. Ik had ze die de bos. De rijden. Mama had me gezoend. Als je de shit de gods mijn ontro. Is dan de shit en was is zeker. We had ze die met de rijden.
So the interesting part here is also the question of aesthetic. The first and the second video are much more aligned to popular music, and the third aspect of also how Ricky Rose talk about musical aesthetic within the community is that there's a certain type of aesthetic that women are usually not only allowed, but the public is attracted to a certain type of voices, and she's also presenting a different voices to women by leading and the one who are still inside. So for Women and Girls Only is a study of ultra-Orthodox womanhood in the 21st century. Let me go back to this, I'm sorry. Here. In the 21st century North America, and the role of the arts, technology, and media in reshaping religion. Shedding lights on a new market and industry, the book offers a theoretical framework for rethinking religiosity through an ethnography of women's life in this fortuitous artistic space. As a key catalyst of the recent crisis of religious authority, manifested by the democratization of the digital, the female art worlds have become a case for understanding daily life changes in religious communities, punctuating not only social and cultural life, but also economic life. Contrary to most research on religious women in those communities, which focuses on their predictable position as wives and mothers, I collaborated with women in rare roles, including as singers, musicians, producers, studio owners, dancers, filmmakers, and actresses, who are using the arts as an economy. While the arts might be considered a liminal practice existing in peripheral spaces and therefore unrepresentative of broader society, in these film communities, these productions are largely consumed, and they reveal important changes in the making of publicity and the way also different organizations are now reintegrating those productions into their making. By producing music, plays, films, and dance on stage, on screen, online, and in the studio, these women have created two vibrant artistic scenes that both challenge and reinforce orthodoxy. Former ultra-Orthodox women accomplished this work by diversifying women's narrative in theater, film, and music, like we've seen with Ricky Rose, for general audiences, but also a lot of actresses and filmmakers who are outside producing content for non-Orthodox media. So they are reframing cultural appropriation of Hasidic identities on North American stages and screens. Ultra-Orthodox women do it by negotiating religious norms to create a market and an industry in the arts for those within their communities, redefining the standards for publicity that dictate the Orthodox public space. While my book also explores the work of Haredi women artists who are no longer observant and who now perform for public non-Orthodox audiences like Ricky Rose, reshaping the way Orthodox and Hasidic cultures are perceived, I will now focus only on the women who are creating artistic content within the community and for women and girls only. So the first of three main arguments this book makes is that religious women, in the face of the change in the arts and technology, are redefining the art of being public and private. This is an argument that lies at the intersection of anthropology of religion, gender, and the arts that contributes to anthropology. The work of Saba Mahmoud is particularly central to this literature. Nevertheless, this literature relegates women to their private roles, focusing essentially on women's positions as daughters, mothers, and wives, or on the agency they express through their investment in religion, religious knowledge, and practice. This book is aligned with this anthropological tradition that defies the liberal universal feminist tropes and recognizes that women's agency should not be determined only by public expression and women's publicity. But I approach the question of private and public space in a manner that goes beyond this divide that has nourished the literature for decades. Throughout the book, I use publicity to refer to this process of making visible, audible, and accessible creators, their projects, their ideas, and their work. Second, this book makes the case for the significance of technology and the arts in the making of new senses of belonging, arguing for a definition of religious communities beyond the local thanks to artistic productions. I observe how technology transforms women's sense of belonging beyond blood and traditional kinship ties, expanding it to a global scale through a strengthening of the sense of relatedness. Of course, Haredi Jewish women are no stranger to performance, but their access to technology at home has completely transformed it. This access has facilitated the creation of a transnational market and industry where the concept of copyright, intellectual property, and celebrity are redefining the various expression of modesty. And here, this is also through this lens that I'm trying to also rethink Hasidic culture beyond the idea of the shtetl, beyond the locality. So I did a lot of ethnography beyond Montreal and New York, among several communities, but this is kind of also looking at the connection between all those different places, all those different communities, and also the last argument is thinking about being inside and outside the communities, that actually it's much more complicated and there's a lot of contact between those worlds. So I organize, so this is just the table of content of the book. I focus on four main art worlds, or as I call the female art worlds. So it goes from the most conservative place, the private performer, and this is where I work with essentially Satmar, Belts community in Montreal and in New York. Then you have the chapter on the celebrity, and this is about this industry, the making of this industry that really emerged with, or exploded, I would say, with COVID. And this is the creation of what I call the modest public. And then you have the chapter about the influencer, and this is how some artists who are famous now are using social media to advocate for different issues, for the issue of agunot, for instance, or also the idea of having women's faces in magazine in Orthodox media, and different types of, I would say, some of them would be characterized as post-feminist activism, but they never use these terms in their activism. And the last part is about the public artists, the one who are trying to transform Hasidic culture outside. And I end with the story of a woman. Her name is Leah Foster. She's a comedian and she's also a singer. And she is very interesting because in a lot of her performances, even she not part of the community anymore, but in the audience you have a lot of women who are coming from all those different communities, inside, outside, and you even have liberal Jewish women or men, and it's also a mixed audience. So this is really to rethink about the connection between all those worlds. So let's get into two chapters to give you a sense of what I'm talking about when I say this publicity and making visible and what is happening through this lens for the community itself when I talk about social changes. So the first one, we're going to get into Kiryas Joel. So Kiryas Joel, also known as KJ, is a village in upstate New York known for being the home of the most secluded Hasidic communities in North America. On my way there in the summer of 2020, I met the female Hasidic musician, singer, and educator, Toby. Toby disseminates her work, creative work, without her name or her face, according to the norms of modesty in her community. Since that meeting, Toby and I have communicated on a regular basis. She often sends me video and announcement about her musical endeavors. whether they are practice sessions, performances, or music lessons for girls. In mid-April of 2021, Toby sent me a WhatsApp message to announce her published interview with the Yiddish Hasidic women's magazine of her community. As its title implies, Balebusta, a Yiddish term meaning busy housewives, covers issues of interest in Yiddish Hasidic women. It is distributed to thousands of people throughout KJ. Emphasizing Toby's position as a married woman, mother, performer, and educator, the interview normalizes her musical project in KJ, which is teaching violin, piano, and guitar to girls, highlighting how she serves her community by encouraging women and girls to develop their talent by learning an instrument. The piece masks her first name behind her married name, referring to her as Mrs. T. Heimovich, and includes no photo of her. Many in feminist liberal circles would likely describe Toby as invisible, or at least render unrecognizable to the many women who know her. Nevertheless, Balebusta promoted her individual and economic success by publishing this interview and by discussing her music disconnected from any religious practice, creating an interesting paradox between modesty, individuality, and self-production and promotion. Traditionally, musical talent is framed by giving by God to respect the norm of modesty, and it should not be self-promoted. So this is for the collective. With this contradiction emerges an understanding of women's visibility that does not involve the exposure of faces, even of names and bodies, defying Western liberal feminists and its view that cultural agency must be reflected by the visible exposure and celebration of women's images and their names. So the interesting part in this chapter, I start with the story of Toby, and Toby developed her, private practice because she was very critical about the fact that Satmar schools, after 12 years old, the girls, after the bar mitzvah, they were not able to perform even for the family in the schools. So she wanted to create this alternative, spaces for the girls to learn about music and instruments. So not only she has an educational center in her basement, but she also has a band. And the name of the band is Toby's Band, and she performs across different Hasidic communities, in summer camps, and also in different organizations. And the interesting aspect is that Toby, she has the support of her family, her husband. She never asked any rabbis to organize this, and actually the fact that she's not fully visible, people call the Toby's Band, but she doesn't advertise necessarily the lessons, or more specifically the band, but it's more this informal knowledge. She is able to play between the individuality and the collective, and in many cases she emphasizes on the role of music and the arts for the girls to gain self-confidence, but always doing it within the context of the group. So there's this constant negotiation between the individuality, the self-promotion, but also to make it for the good of the community. The other interesting aspect in this chapter is that I really talk about the school performance and the development of an informal way for women and girls to have copyrights or to be recognized. For many of the women I work essentially with a Bell's school, and they told me that traditionally, I've met those women and girls, so the difference is when they're married or they're not married. Some of them compose songs on request for different simchas, event, for marriage, for weddings, for bat mitzvah, for birthdays, different occasions. And they will compose, so they will receive a fee, but then the song belongs to the community. And recently, there is, because indeed it's part of this informal market, but there was a very interesting anecdote that came out when I asked about copyrights and intellectual property. So the woman who was in charge of the school performance in the Bells community told me that for the summer camp, they were preparing a big production, and the girls went to a studio in New York they heard the song in Monsey. They loved it. And they said, we're going to take it and we're going to record it. So they went to the recording studio And a lot of those recording studios are, girls and women who are the main entrepreneur of those studios. And he came, they started to sing, and the woman stopped. And she said, did you ask, do you have a permission to record it? And then she didn't know what to do, because she didn't care who was the composer of that song for the summer camp. And the owner of this home studio knew this composer, and she said, you need to ask her permission. And started to have this kind of informal negotiation about requesting or those knowledge that, okay, to whom belonged the song? And there's kind of new questions emerging also for the girls who said, okay, maybe I'm going to sign my name now, even if it's going to be an MP3 file, MP3 file that I'm going to send, I'm going to have my name on it. Then people will know that I'm the one who composed it. And there's kind of this informal way of circulating those productions. So this is a real economy. It's not only, for social and education purposes. Another interesting aspect is the technology lady. The technology lady in Montreal, she's collecting all those informal productions for music, but also for theater, but also films that are across Hasidic communities, so New York, Montreal, Antwerp, London, in Israel. And actually she has a lot of people are sending her those materials, and then she collects them. And if you're going for a holiday, you want to have kosher entertainment, you can go to the technology lady and she will give you an iPad and you will rent the iPad. So she's a kind of creating a network of this informal market. And I'm unpacking this new development. The other interesting aspect of the circulation of this informal market is the hotline. There's a famous song interpreted by Benny Friedman. It's called Kol Isha, and the song Kol Isha has been reinterpreted by women in New York, in English and in Yiddish. And it was this woman who decided to even have a hotline to be able for the girls to listen to. So that's you cannot find it on social media. So this is a very informal and private market. That's why I call it the informal market, but there are different ways for it to circulate across communities. So that's for the private performer. Now let's get into the space of the celebrity. The cover of January 13, 2021 issue of Ami Living, a weekly magazine for Orthodox women, reads, a studio grows in Brooklyn. Rochel Leah Rafer creates music and helps others create their own. The story within positions Rafer, a Hasidic woman from Borough Park who built a home recording studio in her basement, as a success story, part of the growing phenomenon of Orthodox women and Hasidic girls and women becoming entrepreneurs and professionals in the domain of the arts, entertainment, and technology. Respecting the norm of the ultra-Orthodox press, Ami Living did not show Rafer's face in its pages, but did publish her name, an approach contrary to that followed by the magazine Balebusta in the Satmar community, as we saw earlier. The story presents her creativity, curiosity, and musical talent as vehicles for serving and supporting others in the community. Rafer started out as an autodidact, reproducing the songs of others, and later received music lessons for a short time with the support of her parents. The story depicts this training as a major factor in the launch of her music career, carefully underscoring that she has had religious support from Rebbetzin Goldberger, who is the principal of the Bobov school in the area and the daughter of the Bobover Rebbe. The counterbalance Rafer's professional accomplishments. The article's author, Musia Kaplan, suggests towards the end of the piece that Rafer's domestic role remains a top priority, and I quote, aside from her musical career, Rochel Leah is a busy wife and mother of 4. Like most working moms, she sees each day as a balancing act. Jewish education is a full-time job. Her family is her first priority. She insists on being there to welcome the kids when they get home from school and makes sure to prepare supper before her husband's arrival. A few years ago, she decided to get rid of her smartphone and she could have peace of mind outside the studio. Her dedication to music will never override her devotion to her family. Thankfully, the two usually don't conflict. Rochelea's family loves and supports the music studio that is growing in Brooklyn, and the melodies that pour forth bring joy and aspiration to all. End quote. Although the publication acknowledges Rafer's fame and therefore promotes the success of women in the arts, the publication also reminds readers that the main duty of the woman is to be a mother and a wife, with a focus on a family and a home. So interestingly, when I met Rochelea, she didn't mention at all this tension between, personal and family. Maybe it's because I was there to really talk about her professional life. But throughout the years, I was able to have much more conversation with her, and she mentioned this constant negotiation, to be able to enter and to access those media, to perform and to also present a certain part of herself that she needs to emphasize. And indeed, that's her positionality as a married woman and as a mother. In the chapter on celebrity, so I really unpacked how different women are now, how they're becoming famous. And I use the term fame and even celebrity because it's, music video, you have almost 500,000 views on YouTube. They're available, a lot of their production are available on streaming platform. They also have agents, they are doing on tour. Just to give you an example, Bracha Jaffe was, and also in some cases there are controversy. Bracha Jaffe was organizing a concert in London in 2023, or early 2024, last year, I think. And it was supposed to be, and it was actually a packed event, but some religious authority in London tried to cancel the event and to prevent her on, organizing the concert. This is an example. You have, hundreds and hundreds of girls there. You also have a musical Broadway happening in Brooklyn. It's called Rachel's Place. It's been years and years that is happening, and you have, also on stage and in the audience, only women and girls performing. And the interesting aspect with the story of Bracha Jaffe is that even with religious authority trying to block the performance and on social media, there was a constant back and forth if she was going to cancel or not. And she really emphasized on her position as a mother, as someone serving the community, and most importantly, to bring different faces for the girls instead of going outside the community to find role models, but to have role models within the community itself. But she kept, the strength, I would say, and the concert happened, and it was still packed. So I really talk about the circulation of also this that I call the Kol Isha industry. So why it's an industry and the otherwise is informal markets is that they are part of also distributors. You go to Jewish store, you will find their DVDs, you will find their CDs, you will also find it online, and they are in dialogue with other also Orthodox or Hasidic singers. So that's kind of part of this ecology. For the interesting part about how it is changing the community, I want to talk about this episode that happened in 2020 during COVID, because a lot of those Orthodox Jewish organizations, social organizations that are supporting different causes are supporting events that are for women and girls only, indeed for tzedakah, to collect fund for different causes. And in many cases, they have women who are entertaining the audience, and they also need to advertise on social media. Some of them, and traditionally, those organizations didn't have on their social media women performing, and since 2020, it started to become a kind of now it's a norm for many of them. If you go to their YouTube platform, they will have video of women sometimes singing, and they will sponsor their music video. So Bracha Jaffe's first video was sponsored by Amudim, who is an organization who is supporting victims of sexual abuse and a lot of different other abuse. So that was one example. They invested in this cause. This one is the organization Bonei Olam, who is dealing with a lot of issue of fertility. And in 2020, they decided to sponsor this music video of Zachini that was for campaign to encourage women to give $1 before lighting the candles for Shabbos on Friday. So before Shabbos, $1 all over the world, and to collect fund for Boni Olam. And I think they didn't think that much. They decided to have a woman composing the song, Miriam Israeli, who is based in Israel, and to have two men singing, Bracha Levin and Benny Friedman, with the New York Boys Choir. And it was a scandal because the song, and we're going to see what happened a little bit, but the fact that it was for their social media audience, I think they didn't realize that at the time you also have people on social media who were women and who wanted to see women. So I'm going to show you the two videos, but let me finish the story. So what happened is that after the backlash, they decided to contact Devorah Schwartz and Bracha Jaffe, who are two well-known singers in the ultra-Orthodox Haredi circles, not to compose, but to give a cover of the song. But they were a little bit afraid because they didn't know how their audience will react. Because they say, okay, we're going to sponsor this music video, but we want to see what's going to happen. So they asked Bracha and Devorah to put it on their social media, on their YouTube. They didn't put it on their social media YouTube channel. They say, okay, we're going to sponsor it. You're going to record it. It's not going to be exactly Boni Olam, but let's see what's happening. And it's one of the most popular, music video. And since then, now they will have music video that is sponsored with women singing on their YouTube channel. But that's an interesting moment of transition because they didn't know how to deal with that. And so the thing is that their audience who is already on social media will consume, but the one who is not on social media, like in the most conservative of Hasidic circles, that's not a problem. They don't know, they are not on social media, so they don't consume. But if you're on social media and you want to talk about women and encourage women, it's better if you have women's face, because the women on social media most of them are those type. So let me show you that, and then I will conclude. And the interesting part is also Rahul Levin, he also sang for the first song. Some people also say that he has a kind of a feminine tone in his voice. So I think it is for that reason also he was chosen, but you will see why also it may have been. So there's also this moment he's lighting the light, so he's singing lyrics that are supposed to be women singing. So that was also the discussion was all about that.
Prayers that rends the skies, for a mother's tears can shatter every gate that bars the way. All the heavens would echo those words that mothers say.
V'zakeni, v'zakeni, take my children by the hand, help them walk along your way, may they never go astray.
So first was Benny Friedman, and this is Rahul Levin, and now we're gonna listen to the version Devorah and Bracha.
words that mothers say. Is okay, take my children by the hand.
Okay, I just wanted to show you a little bit the aesthetic norms for publicity. So this is an example of the cover of a film by Malky Weingarten. The cover of my book is also the shooting of a movie that I participate in with Malky Weingarten. So this is an example. It's written for women only, and she also did a song collection of all her movie. So this is an example of how it is in the Orthodox media. So you will not see the faces, and you will see the names. This is not Satmar, this is not the Balibusta, so you will see their names and promotion, especially in that believing there's a lot going on for the promotion of women's event. And then this is what is happening on social media. On social media, so this is on the left. The two photos here are from Devorah Schwartz concert that she organized, and below this is Malky Weingarten, the filmmaker. And this is, if you go on their social media, you will see their faces. There are, them singing, dancing, speaking. And Devorah Schwartz has a public account, and Bracha Jaffe had a private. There's a lot of interesting moment of back and forth of them changing. And Malky Weingarten, the filmmaker, has now a private, which I didn't check recently. I didn't ask her, but she said that she decided to have private because it was much more comfortable. She was too annoyed by those men who were sending annoying messages. That's her quote. So to conclude, the arts produced by female celebrities and artists, which may see as unconventional and subversive, circulate around the globe through both online and traditional media. As a result, the informal market, that is the traditional format of the female art world, as we saw earlier, has been transformed from emphasis on the collective to recognition of individual artists, from private performance to public YouTube videos and streaming. And the interesting aspect is that everything that is happening in a private sphere, the very, very Hasidic, more conservative spaces, they know what is going on in those in between or just modest public space, and they are also inspired by what is happening there, and vice versa. Thus, a section of ultra-Orthodox women's artistic space has been revamped into a global commodified industry. Ultra-Orthodox women and girls worldwide consume Kol Isha media screenings, watching live performances at Tzedakah events or summer camp, ordering CDs, digital music files online, or even just surfing the web. And I even didn't talk about the film, but that's also a very interesting part of media and production. This feminine artistic space has a presence on YouTube, Instagram, and even TikTok, as well as in local and international Jewish magazines where stars, films, performances, and educational programs are advertised. This new industry does not contradict its origins in the educational system and the traditional collective space of women's performance. Rather, it transformed this institution, translating external values and processes into an Orthodox context. Most importantly, it also informs us on the way celebrity culture and fandom are incorporated, adapted into the religious context. While I was writing in the conclusion of the book, a group of rabbis was organizing a large gathering to oppose the presence of women on social media. It was June 2022. If my book uncovers the role these women plays in reshaping orthodoxy at a time when some forms of opposition were happening more quietly, I feared that this public move by rabbinic authority would completely contradict my argument. And I was writing the conclusion. But none of the women I discuss in the book closed their Instagram accounts or stopped their activities online. On the contrary, some began speaking out even louder. And yet, the backlash some of them received didn't stop there. Nevertheless, they continued. They kept creating, performing, sharing, and women and girls kept consuming, watching, and engaging more than ever. Does this book capture a moment in the history of North American Orthodoxy that is only temporary? Or will these truly structural changes have long-term impact? It is hard to predict, but one thing is certain. These women will continue to circumvent norms and laws as they fight for the right to determine who and what they want to be, and the digital will remain one of their tools. Not only are these women reshaping orthodoxy from within and from without, but they are encouraging us to rethink religious authority with the digital and beyond the male paradigm. In other words, they are remaking orthodoxy. This book tells a story about the strategies these women, and also the one who left, used to redefine themselves as autonomous, creative, and empowered through the arts and digital technologies. Some of them may do it simply, find new ways to support the system, others to criticize, challenge, or translate it. The future of from-female art worlds is in the hands of the women who shape them, their followers and consumers. As for feminist ethnomusicologists like myself, who seeks to observe and capture the contrasting narratives emerging from these art worlds, the surprises reside in the ways these women have complicated my understanding of religious and secular womanhood in 21st century North America by revisiting the norms and exposing the margins of Orthodox life. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Jessica, for such a wonderful paper and presentation. The book is really fabulous, and your expression of it is really, really just great. I work similarly in this area. I work on music of Orthodox men, and Jess and I have had conversations about this for many years, and the conversation's ongoing.
Exactly.
So just some various observations. Just sort of in the order in which you spoke. One of the interesting things that I've experienced, in my life through my wife, who's a part of this stuff in some ways, an Orthodox female singer, is that modern Orthodoxy sort of deals with this stuff in a slightly different way. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you encountered any of that, but so my wife is a female singer who's Orthodox, who works in this Orthodox world. And so I've been accustomed to being very sensitive to these issues as well. One of the first times I saw the Maccabees' very famous video called Candlelight, I saw that there were no women in the video. So the first interview I did with someone from the Maccabees, and this goes back probably 10, 12 years, I said, how come there are no women in this? Is that a statement that you're making? And one of the Maccabee guys I spoke to was so embarrassed by this comment and basically said, we had no intention of excluding women. Mm-hmm. They said that their wives, girlfriends were just not available the day that they shot it. Mm-hmm. And in every subsequent video that they did, they always include women. Mm-hmm. Because it's like they want to not have that particular criticism. So it's really kind of interesting, the distinctions between the Orthodox and non-Orthodox. So one of the things that I know that my wife has talked about is that sometimes when she's done studio work, there have been men in the studio. And it's interesting to know that there are different combinations of things. It might be non-Jewish men who are in the studio, or Orthodox men who have asked a shaila about being there. So I think that there's a very interesting story in that.
Can I add something on this?
Yeah.
So what is, can you hear me well? Yeah. What is very interesting for me, that indeed the chapter on the celebrity where women are working with men, Bracha Jaffe, for instance, there's a moment Frank Landon, who is doing the trumpet in one of the music video, and a very important Israeli music producer who's working with her. But the part on the private performers, the Hasidic women, they really do not work with men. And actually, because of the digital, because the fact that now you can have a home studio at home, they don't need men. They learn themselves, to do the music studio, basic, Proto Tools kind of technology, and they are making the music. And they really it allowed this informal market to develop. Because before that, a lot of the women, they were not comfortable. Those very, very, the most Hasidic, communities, they were not comfortable to record. So they were doing things in schools or camps. I'm not talking about Chabad. I'm talking about, all the others. Yeah. And it allowed them really create this informal market, to feel comfortable. And that's, for me, that was like also the interesting part.
Yeah, I mean, that's another interesting point that I wanted to make, is how generational this is. Because there were women in the 70s and 80s. I mean, Basia was recording in the 70s, and that was just a pseudonym. No one knew who, well, people in the industry knew who she was, but she didn't want to be known. And in other women, and so I think what seems to be part of this proliferation is just a generation that is a digital generation that operates things in different ways. Yeah. I also felt, when I was hearing the first example with Baruch Levine, that if the use of his voice was because his voice has this much softer sound to it. And I've shared this with you many times before, that in a lot of the work that I've done, particularly teenage girls, and this was research I did 25 or maybe even 30 years ago, really liked more of the boys' choir songs than anything else, because probably it was within their vocal range, and also an aesthetic that was something really interesting to them. So one of the thoughts I had is that, you've shown us all the successful women, what happens when this doesn't work out? Because every industry is going to have a hierarchy of different things. So,
first of all, indeed, that's a small, like anywhere, if you want to become a celebrity, you don't have that many, Lady Gaga, it's a very small pool. I would say that first of all, there is only one in the book that I talk about that is not married. This is Shaindy Platzer. She's the only one. All the others are already, they have their family, they have their audience. And the one, some of them, like Leah Foster, she's not part of the community anymore, Ricky Rose as well. But Ricky Rose never had a kind of an audience within the community, because for her, it's interesting, because I asked her, you never thought about maybe going to Litvish or more open, but for her and for her family, being in the middle would be the same than completely leaving the community. So that didn't make any difference for her. I would say the question of the way they need to perform also womanhood in terms of the appearance. That's also an important part of the success, the voice as well, and the type of music that they produce. That's something that I said, like there is a Hannah Raskin, for instance, that is from the Chabad community. She doesn't live a Chabad life anymore, but she does a lot of music for healing purposes. Nigunim, she integrates nigunim into the world of women. And I actually wanted to organize an event in Borough Park with some Hasidic women, and one of my friends said, it won't work, they won't come, because it won't be successful in our community, because the girls, they will listen to something else. So there was the question of aesthetic, and we talked a lot about, success, and our colleague Jeremiah Lockwood is writing a lot about the same thing with Hasidic singers, so those marginal, singers that are, when they sing cantoral music, chazanut, they are not successful in the mainstream Orthodox, because what they produce aesthetically doesn't work. So I think there's a lot, and Bracha Jaffe is working a lot with jazz, and she tries a lot of different things, but she knows where is her audience if she wants to have Parnasse with that. So.
Yeah, I mean, that was always the interesting thing to me, is how the successful artists have that narrative of what works, through and what they're trying to project. I thought that the example you gave of the Vizakeni song, I hadn't heard it before. That's an incredible example.
Yeah.
Journeys, which is the A.B. Rottenberg's songs that started in the 1980s. On his first album, he has a song called Teardrop. And it's basically a song sung by a man, and it starts off with this aspect of how, like, a lonely woman who's a Holocaust refugee has no money, Shabbat's about to start, there's a tear from her eye, and the tear falls down, and then that tear is a spark that lights the candles.
Oh.
I mean, it's a really, really beautiful, beautiful song. And I think what's interesting is that, I'd be interested to see what A.B. Rottenberg would say about it, but I think that it's clearly a story of, it's a male singer who's singing about a woman, but I don't know that it's necessarily like a man telling the story. It's just a male voice. You know, so I think embedded in some of the earlier Orthodox things are these kinds of stories.
Yeah.
You know, of men singing about women.
And I think, you know, it's that the women who are advocating to change, you know, the Orthodox media to have, you know, in the Mishpacha magazine or the Amelie, to have women's faces. So there are this group of women, when they saw that, they will look at it through this lens, you know, to the fact that, hey, this is a song about women, there's no women. The same with the first one.
Right. Which again, I think gets back to how generational it is.
Yes.
Right, because I think a generation, or maybe 2 generations earlier, I don't think that would have come up.
Yeah, with that idea.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just so much of what you're sharing about how they're performing Orthodox, you know, womanhood, is sort of that ideal projection is what the male singers are doing too.
Yeah.
And the producers that I spoke to in the big like Haas concerts is like Avram Fried like said to me that they've gone through everything that he wears.
Yeah.
You know, that seat are going to be a certain length.
Yeah.
You know, the vest that he's going to wear, the shirt. I mean, there's a consciousness of that image that's being projected.
Yeah, so that's definitely part of the celebrity culture. And actually, thinking about success, it's extremely important, you know, the way they, you know, their look, the way, and I talk about a form of homogenization also. It's very interesting. I analyzed the development. So there's another, she's from London, Dobie Baum, and Malky Weingartner, and it's to look at Dobie Baum's transformation on social media and to see how, you know, she had a short shaitel and suddenly it became a little bit longer, and same thing with, so the makeup, there's a certain homogenization also of beauty standard as well, and the type of, the color that they will use, you know, and the makeup and the different, also the language to integrate the family, but almost never the husband. It's also an interesting aspect.
That is interesting.
Yeah, very, very rare that we'll see so it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
And also, you know, just lastly, I found that as much as the male concerts really show the male faces in the concert promotions, the albums tend to not do that. The albums tend to, I think it might kind of come and go in some ways, but there is this, I think a lot of them feel that that's a place not to go. But anyways, the concert promotion I think is different than the album cover.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, you know, Shulam Lemmer or even Bernie Friedman, and they have their photos.
On their albums as well?
Yeah, even Lipa as well.
Yeah.
Not all, but
yeah. I guess I'm thinking about some of the older ones, yeah. All right, well, we could go on, but we want to ask if you have questions and hear your ideas. Yes, please.
One of the things that I think is interesting is it seems like in the more Haredi, the Hasidic, not Chabad communities, because women and girls they're very comfortable with all of their social activities are women and girls. It actually encourages more success and more achievement in this area, more support for female performance, because even in the Litvish or Yeshivish communities, you have women who go to hear men sing. There's not as much of a separation, whereas in these Hasidic communities, if all of the entertainment is provided by women for women, there's more of a freedom and more of an independence there.
True.
And it's an interesting juxtaposition because you might see those women as being less free or less independent, but in fact they have more independence because they do things separately from men all the time.
All the time, yeah. And actually that's also what happened with the studio, that they really, but on the other hand, the hardest part is that it's closer in terms of, for instance, diversity of also education around the arts, because the pool is smaller, and indeed in the arts you always have a kind of how things come in and come out. So they are, and I think for the male too, for the Hasidic soundscape, it's more homogeneous, I would say, in terms of what you can hear and the story that you can hear as well, compared to, for instance, the chapter on the celebrity. I really talk about, Malki Weingarter. She discussed, mental health issue. There is another one was about, beauty standards, kind of those topic. But in the Hasid, because indeed it's, on one hand they are more independent, but they're also more restricted in terms of the subject that they can touch. And so this kind of very interesting paradox.
I think it leads to, obviously it's leading to a different form of creativity.
Definitely.
That goes beyond what the men are doing.
Yeah. Also to young women who like the idea of being performers, a way to do that and stay within the community, as opposed to feeling like if that's what they want, they have to leave.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which the rabbi should think about before saying it's bad.
Do people typically perform only within their own Hasidic sect, or?
So actually, for the school, yes. For the school and the camps, it's mainly what is happening within. But for instance, Toby, and Toby is very it's very rare, but she performs across the different Hasidic communities. But the celebrity, they will perform everywhere. They will go to different camps. They're very, so that's much broader. But I would say the married women in the more Hasidic, communities, they will also have kumzits, sometimes very private gathering, and it's also mixed. Yeah.
I'm really interested in the style of music too that is being performed and recorded, and much of what I've heard, which is, I'm sure, a very small cross section compared to what you've researched, but it's representative of what you've shown, which seems to be sort of pop influence as opposed to from, let's say, Yiddish folk traditions or Platzer traditions.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could speak to that, and if you've also seen evidence of any of the sort of older traditions, older folk traditions come into play, or mostly it's from the more pop.
So it's a good question. So there's the influence also of the Orthodox soundscape that is extremely pop-oriented. That is, I would say, the norm with what they will listen. But in certain occasions, for instance, I've been to Shabbos table, and especially in this family, I talk a lot about it, and it's extremely, it's a total different sound, and even the aesthetic of the voice. The girls will sing completely different than when they are in schools. They have a very powerful voice, and it's almost like the same style that Ricky Rose. I mean, it's very hard maybe in this to listen, but it's not this pop sound or aesthetic of the voice. So this is happening, but not in the home studio, not when they will have to do those use the technology. But for instance, in the school, they will not project their voice as much. So they will also not, it sounds in certain cases also with Toby a little bit folky, as kind of with the guitar, because they don't necessarily project their voice, a little bit in the nose as well. And for some people, it will also even sound out of tune. And that's a very interesting, very different than what you just heard. I'm never presenting anything that is happening in the Hasidic school, or because they don't, it's very, very private. So but I have, in some cases I can show, it depends, but in public when I have a talk, I never do that. But they will have a different types of voice, kind of a little bit more folk. But when they will record, so there's a kind of an interesting back and forth depending on where they will perform. And this family that is, they like to say they're a very musical family. They listen to a lot of Yom Tov Erlech, for instance. So the father is also recording that type of, so they're part of their soundscape. Yeah.
I wonder how much summer camps plays a role for girls as well, as opposed to schools where maybe summer camps are different.
Yeah, so not all the girls will go, and some of them, for instance, in Montreal, they will go maybe one or twice through their life, because it depends on the economy as well, because the summer camps is very expensive for the girls, and in Montreal, for instance, you don't have the same type of summer camp that you have in the US, so then if they have to go to the US, it's much more expensive. But it does, for those who are going there, indeed, they have huge production, and it's very, very important. But what I've observed in Montreal case is really kind of the play that they have in school, and it's, all in Yiddish, for instance. Well, I know that in New York, I worked with I went to a few performances as well, but it was more English and Yiddish. While in Montreal, the Hasidic is just all in Yiddish. Well, I'm not talking about, in New York, I didn't work with Sadmar School. But that's interesting to see. I think the school is definitely, because, they're all going to school, the camps, it will depend.
Yeah, and I think the whole Catskills culture.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And unfortunately, I was trying to find, archives, about that. And
is there anything in here?
So the school in Montreal they started to record because, indeed, the democratization of, making your own video in the 90s. So I was able to have the technology lady. She has all the video from the school. Wow. But before that, no. Yeah.
Other questions? So, yeah.
So it seems to me that there are these circles that are kind of isolated from each other, right? So in one sense, there's the gender divide, but there's also is there some isolation from secular music, right?
Yes and no.
Where is it coming from? Because obviously there's a tremendous amount of pop music influence.
Yeah, I mean, the celebrity, all of them are listening to secular music, and then the more Hasidic place, they're listening to them. They will also listen to men, I don't know if you know the Despacito version in Yiddish, that became some I forgot who started, but started to have for wedding, for simchas. And then I remember my students, not for music, I also taught socio-anthropology to Hasidic women in Montreal for a year. And some of the women came and said, oh, well, Jessica, because they know that I'm looking at music, we discovered this amazing song last night. And then they started to sing a little bit, said, okay, and I told them where it was coming from, and they didn't know. So that's one example of the circulation. Another example, I didn't talk about it here, but a way also to normalize all those performative aspects is the wellness part. So a lot of women are doing that to say it's good for mental health, to bring music, to bring dance. And I work with a dancer who's giving classes to Hasidic women after giving birth, for their body to be, it's called the exercise dance. And I remember that she it's in Hebrew, it's called, this is a Hebrew version of Mambo number 5, that maybe you know, Mambo number, and I was dancing, and also she was bringing Zumba movement, And then at the end, we had a conversation, and the woman said, oh, I heard that Zumba became so popular, but it's so terrible, and started to criticize a little bit. But she was just dancing, and reproducing, and also listening. So that's kind of those way of having, the contrafactum, it's not covered. So you keep the same melody, and it's very common in, Jewish music. We have been doing that for, always. And it kind of doing the same here, and if they are not exposed, but you have the artists who are kind of those mediator between all those worlds, and so that's why I have the circle where they're all connected. Even some artists who left the community some of them will perform in some of the movies, or they will be part of the crowd, the crowd, the stage. Yeah.
I think just in response to that question, I'm only saying this because I have 2 Haredi sons, so I feel like I can answer this. These children are listening to music on YouTube, and it's exactly what you were saying about there being a generational issue with social media. Even though they're not necessarily allowed to watch television or to go on the internet, they somehow find ways to watch music on YouTube. And Israeli pop music also informs the religious music a lot, because a lot of the Israeli pop music is religious, even though it's not necessarily super religious people singing it.
Yeah. And even if you have, an entire family where they will not go to listen to those rituals plays in their school, they may have 1 or 2, and they will come and they will discuss it, and they say, okay, you heard about that. When I was in Montreal during COVID, my neighbor, I was in Utrecht in the middle of the shtetl, and I remember my neighbor, very, very sad, and we talked, I had those DVDs. I said, oh, do you know? She said, shh, yeah, I know about it. Especially now during the pandemic, and, so everybody knew. And then when I said, yeah, I work with Malki Weingarten, and it was like, oh my God, the celebrity, So it's kind of this interesting
That's great.
reality.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, before we conclude, do you want to tell us about what you're working on now?
Yes, so now I'm working, I have 2, one on Jewish music and global development of the concept with my colleague, with Sarah Ross, and the other one is I'm working on wellness and more specifically also on psychedelic, the use of psychedelic for healing purposes in Jewish circles and also in the Haredi circles. So that's kind of also very exciting. And there's a lot about Jewish music as well when you do those kind of, when they are, into the healing, doing healing practices.
So we have Jessica's book in the back for sale. Maybe she'll sign it as well.
Yeah.
And again, a big thanks to Jessica Roda for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.